us out, guys. I was an orphan lost at the fall, running away when I'd hear you call. But Father, you worked your will, and I had no righteousness of my own. I had no right to draw near your throne. But Father, you loved me still, and in love before you laid the world's foundation, you predestined to adopt me as your own. You have raised me up so high above my station. I'm a child of God by grace and grace alone. Oh, take that truth in, guys. It's by nothing that we did. It's only by Jesus coming down and leaving his throne for us. Come on, let's sing this. You left your home to seek out the lost. You knew the great and terrible cost. But Jesus, your face was sad, and I worked my fingers down to the bone, but nothing I did could ever atone. But Jesus, you paid my debt. By your blood I have redemption and salvation. Lord, you died that I might reap what you have sown, and you rose that I might be a new creation. I am born again by grace and grace alone. I was in darkness all of my life. I swore I knew the day from the night. Spirit, you made me see. I swore I knew the way on my own. Head full of rocks, a heart made of stone. But Spirit, you moved in me, and at your touch my sleeping spirit was awakened. On my darkened heart the light of Christ has shone. Called into a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone. So I'll stand in faith by grace and grace alone. I will run the race by grace and grace alone. I will slay my sin by grace and grace alone. I will reach the end by grace and grace alone. It's only by your grace. It's only by his grace, guys. I want us to take that truth in. There's no amount of work, there's no good deeds that could ever impress him enough to get us into heaven. It's only by the blood that Jesus shed. And that makes him so worthy of all of our praise. Worthy of every single song we could ever sing to him. Everything. Our entire lives. So let's sing this out. Worthy. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Sing Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. we live for you. Sing worthy. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. You are worthy. You are worthy. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Oh Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and lead me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone. And and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. So Father, I ask that you lead us in your love to our families, to our communities, to those around us, Lord. Most importantly, lead us in your love to you. Teach us to love you. Teach us to trust you. That when the world gets crazy, when things get chaotic, we have a firm foundation on who you are, Jesus. Not on what we do, but on the promises that you have given us. So Father, I just pray that you speak to us today. That you bless all the families represented here right now. The best that we know how, we choose to worship and lay down our lives at your feet, Jesus. So we love you, we praise you, and we pray all these things in your mighty, precious name, the name of Jesus Christ. And everyone said, amen. You guys enjoy the rest of the service.
Hello, Akuo. It's great to be back with you once again. It's early in the year, and if you haven't joined us yet, you missed out on our word for the year. You see, each year we have a word that God gives us to lead us and to have us focus on. It's kind of like a beacon, a northern star for us to follow throughout the year. And this year, the word is community. We want to be incredibly intentional about the community and how we build it, how we live it out, some of the practices that we need to include, and how they all connect directly to the gospel of Jesus. Now, those are just some of the things that we'll be talking about in this series we are kicking off today called Gospel Living. Now, there was a time I felt like it was the hardest for me to live out the gospel through community. It was during the COVID lockdown in 2020. Remember, at first it was like, oh man, this is just going to be like a week or two. Then it was like months later, and we still hadn't fully opened up. We still hadn't fully started like reconnecting with people. I remember those days. And for me, being incredibly extroverted and fueled by being around groups of people, in some ways, I just kind of fell apart. I was yearning for this community. And as much as Zoom helped us connect, it just wasn't the same. Then as things opened up, we got to be around each other again. People started feeling more and more comfortable, and we got to be with people again, right? Like it was almost like it was back to normal. But for me, I gotta admit, there are skills that I lost. After that amount of time of being on my own and only being in my house and just being with my family all the time, I feel like there are things that I'm still trying to figure out. And there are things that I used to do naturally in community that I now have to remind myself to do now. Then you combine that with the natural speed of life and business, it's incredibly hard for us to build and maintain community, which I think is part of the reason why God has given us the focus of community this year. We're seeing this importance in ourselves. We know that this is something that God is pointing us to, but I think the world is seeing it too. In a New York Times article, Professor Rebecca G. Adams broke down the idea of what it looks like to build community. As external conditions change, it becomes tougher to meet the three conditions that sociologists since the 1950s have considered crucial to making close friends: proximity, repeated, unplanned interactions, and a setting that encourages people to let their guard down and confide in each other. This is why so many people meet their lifelong friends in college. As we've come back to normal in the post-COVID days, it's been hard for us to establish all of these things. A lot of folks don't have the close proximity or the repeated unplanned interactions. And if you can't get those first two, then you definitely aren't at a place where you want to confide in anyone, right? You're not just confiding in strangers walking down the street. So here's the deal. If we want to be a part of a community and build it up These are the things that are needed. And what I love about reading through studies of social sciences is that so regularly they discover exactly what God had already laid out. One of the biblical authors that I like to turn to when it comes to community building is the Apostle Paul. Paul started his life as a Jewish man that was persecuted, or that persecuted Christians in terrible ways. But one day he was blinded by an incredible light, and in this light he hears Jesus. Paul then follows the directions of Jesus, and he's able to see again after getting baptized. And as you can imagine, Paul changes how he was living his life. So instead of persecuting Christians, he turns into a champion of the gospel. He actually spends the rest of his life devoted to telling people about the good news of Jesus Christ. So what Paul would do is, when he was setting up these communities, he would travel from town to town and start preaching. But he didn't stand in the street. He would have to build a community of people. And he knew he would need to make friends and establish something that would last. Normally, Paul would start in the Jewish temple in the city and then go from there. He would go from there, or he would start there because he knew that when he got there, he could expect some common ground, the koinonia, with the people there, that they would all respect the Old Testament as their God. They'd have some basic theological concepts they connected on and some cultural practices. So he was setting up the koinonia in his community, which is really the first step in building a community. Building a community takes common ground. For me, if you can talk about the Spurs or the Cowboys or Marvel superheroes, or you can tell me where like an awesome cheeseburger's at, then we can probably pretty easily become friends. Now, that's just me, and those are actually really superficial things, but what we are really after is finding some common ground that means something. We want to identify with people that we are in community with. For you guys, the practical step of finding some common ground can, I think, actually be very easily done. You see, after this service, you can go and check out akuo.church/community. There you can take a look and see if any of these community groups would be a good fit for you. They're mostly put together around different ideas or interests, and these groups have been created with like a built-in common ground. So once you find the group, once you see the common ground that you have with that group, then you can just sign up for it and you're all set. Now, if you're outside of the community groups looking to make common ground, the best way you can do that when you find yourself sitting across from someone and you don't know what to do is you ask questions. By asking questions about someone else, you can find out who they are and then make connections back to yourself based off of their answers. You can start digging and finding that common ground. Now back to Paul. Once he established that common ground with the community, what would he do next? So let's take a look at 1 Thessalonians, where Paul was writing to a group of friends that helped him start a church. Now in this letter, Paul's fondly recalling how it all got started. Here's what he wrote. As apostles of Christ, we certainly had a right to make some demands of you, but instead we were like children among you, or we were like a mother feeding and caring for her own children. We loved you so much that we shared with you not only God's good news, but our own lives too. Don't you remember, dear brothers and sisters, how hard we worked among you? Night and day we toiled to earn a living so that we would not be a burden to any of you as we preached God's good news to you. You yourselves are our witnesses. And so is God, that we were devout and honest and faultless toward all of you believers. And you know we trusted each of you as a father treats his own children. We pleaded with you, encouraged you, and urged you to live your lives in a way that God would consider worthy. For he called you to share in his kingdom and glory. All right, looking at this scripture, you can almost feel the love that Paul has for this community that he helped create over there. You can really see how open he is with his people. And there are some things that we can really highlight from this passage. We can take a look and start applying when we build community. So let's take a closer look at verses 8, 10, and 12. Because here we can see that building a community takes vulnerable honesty. You see it there when he's saying, we loved you so much that we shared with you not only the good news, but our own lives. You yourselves are our witnesses, and so is God, that we were devout and honest and faultless toward all of you believers. We pleaded with you, encouraged you, and urged you to live your lives in a way that God would consider worthy. So yeah, that next step in building community is honesty, being honest and vulnerable. If you want people to feel comfortable sharing stuff about their life, if you want people to share their life with you, sometimes you need to share about yourself. You need to share your life with them. Y'all, when I talk with you here in my messages, I don't always come over here and share stories that I'm super proud of. Like, man, I nailed it. I don't always feel excited to share with you how I failed at something. But I feel like it's my responsibility to be honest about myself when I'm up here. Because if I can't do it for you, how could I ask you to do it for each other? So when we look at what Paul wrote in verses 8 and 10, it lays all of that out. He says to share your life, be honest and faultless toward your community. So when it comes to community building, you've got to be honest with who you are. But not only that, you have to be honest about what your other community members are doing. You got to cheer them on when they're doing the right things. And you need to tell your friend or yourself when you're going down the wrong path. You got to help those folks out of any bad situations that they are putting themselves in. And just like it says in verse 12, plead, encourage, and urge them to live their lives in a way that God considers worthy. However, when you do this, don't do it in a condemning way. It has to be out of love. Paul doesn't write, condemn, shame, and guilt your community into living their lives in a way that God considers worthy. No, it's not that at all. Which brings us to our next point of community building, and we'll take a look at verses 9 and 11 to kind of set that up. Here's what Paul writes. So building a community takes familial love. Don't you remember, dear brothers and sisters, how hard we worked among you? And you know that we treated each of you as a father treats his own children. So building a community takes familial love. You gotta love your community like family. You gotta go through it with your community. And you can see that Paul loves his folks here. In verse 9, he calls them brothers and sisters. In verse 11, Paul says that they treated each other, each of them, as a father treats his own children. That is all love right there. Now, for you to have a group of people that are strong and willing to have each other's back at every turn, you've got to love each other like you love your family. And for some of you, you need to love them better than you love your family for whatever reason. Now, this idea of loving people like this reminds me of the great theologian Vin Diesel in the cinematic masterpiece Fast 7. There he says, I don't have friends, I got family. And that's exactly how we want you to look at your community once you get in. Your goal is to help build that kind of love in your community. Akua, when you love people in your life, there is one thing that we can do. And it's probably the most important part of community building. Paul mentioned it like this. Building a community takes sharing the good news. He says it right there in 9. Night and day, we toiled to earn a living so that we would not be a burden to any of you as we preached God's good news to you. Part of building a community takes sharing the good news. And for those of you that are believers, this has got to be one of the most important things that you have going on in your life. You see it there in verse 9. Paul is happy to have built a great community, but above everything else, he was there to share the good news. He understood exactly what it could do to change a life, to change a community, and it all begins and ends with Jesus. I mean, it says it right there. He worked to make money to not be a burden just so he could share the good news. And when we look at the life of Jesus, we see him loving people in a similar way. He's not looking to throw lightning bolts at people. He is a friend. He's family. Here's what Jesus said according to his friend and disciple John. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends since I've told you everything the Father told me. Jesus is the one that the good news is all about. For those of you that don't know the good news, it's this. God in human form came down to earth. Jesus. He lived a sinless life and gave up his life and died on the cross. By doing that, he took on the sin of every single person in the world. Then he was placed in a tomb where he remained for 3 days. Then he was resurrected to life and later ascended into heaven. Now, when you believe that this is true, you receive the Holy Spirit, his Spirit, and it dwells in you. Not only that, but this belief is what gets you a ticket into heaven after you pass. Y'all, Jesus could have been the master and made everyone a slave. He could have ruled with fear and power, but he didn't. Instead, he laid his life down for us. Jesus is the greatest friend we could ever ask for, is the greatest family we could ever ask for. Jesus did everything he possibly could to be in fellowship with us. He came down to establish the common ground, the koinonia. He was vulnerable and honest, and he loved like family, and he shared the good news. Now, to get that community for you, well, the first step before doing any of it is simply believing. That's it. You just have to believe in Jesus and what he did here on this earth. Now, for some of you listening right now, you might not have ever proclaimed that. If that's you, thank you for listening to this. I definitely appreciate your interest in what we were talking about and participating in this conversation. Now, if while you were listening today, you decided that you want all this, that you want to be a part of this community, then I can help you do with that. What I would like to do is lead you in a conversation with Jesus, which we would call a prayer. Now, in this prayer, you would just simply confirm your trust and faith in him, that Jesus is who he says he was, the Son of God, the perfect Lamb, sacrificed for you to make you right with God. And I think this can be a little weird, a little scary, or just feel a little off-putting, and I understand that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the rest of our Akuo community to pray along with you during this time, because here at Akuo Church, no one ever has to pray alone. You always have a community there with you. So if you want to confirm your belief in Jesus, just go ahead and say this just between you and him. Just say, Jesus, I believe. I believe in you and what you did here on this earth. Today, the best way I know how, I give you my life. Amen. Now, if you just prayed that prayer for the first time, or if you've never done it or have never done this, we would love for you to get baptized with us. We will have our next chance to get baptized here at Akuo next month. So just start thinking about it, if that might be the right thing for you. Now, also, I want us to have a time to listen to what God is saying in our lives. Let's make ourselves available to him right now, because we know that the best thing that we can do with God, the best ability that we can have, is availability. So what I want to do is just take 2 minutes to sit in silence and listen to God and what he has to tell us. So I'll have you ask a question to him, and then you'll sit in that silence. You can use it today, you can use it tomorrow, you can use it over the next few weeks. He might answer now, or it could be over time. Okay, so here's the question. Just between you and Jesus, just say, Jesus, how can I build up the community around me? We'll take a few minutes to ask and listen, and then I'll come back to finish in prayer. All right, let's pray. Jesus, thank you for everything you've done for us. Thank you for the cross, laying your life down, allowing your body to be broken for us, the blood that you spilled. Thank you. Jesus, will you help us find common ground with the people around us? Will you help us be vulnerable and honest with one another? Will you please help us love people like family? Will you help us receive love from others as well? And Jesus, will you help us share the good news? We thank you for everything, Jesus. We love you, and we pray all of these things in your holy and precious name. Amen. All right, thank you so much for being a part of this today. Before we go, there are a few things that I'd like to share with you. Y'all here at Akuo, we don't want to just talk about community, we want to be about community. So every single week, we're going to keep you posted on what's happening here to help you get connected to the community better than you ever have before. And all these things can be found at akuo.church/calendar, or you can see it in the Church Center app. Now, as we've been talking about this year, one of the ways that we can respond to God's goodness to us is through our generosity. Generosity with our grace, generosity with our time, and generosity with our resources. Now, with that being said, if you have been generous here at Akuo, and you continue to do that, or it's just a one-time thing, whatever it is, if you've been generous here at Akuo, I'd just like to thank you for that. Because when you are generous to Akuo, you're really being generous to your community through Akuo. So thank you. Thank you for being generous to all of us. Now, I understand that not everyone is able to be generous with their resources. If you are someone that needs help with resources, or you know someone who needs some help with resources, please let us know, because we want to be linked to you or your friend or your family member during this time. That's what the church community exists for, to help people out in situations just like that. So please reach out to us through an email, by sending us a message at help@akuo.church. You can also call or text the church at 210-901-8785. Now, if you are willing to be generous with your resources here at Akuo Church, the way that you can do that is by going to our website, akuo.church, and then just following the on-screen instructions there. You can also give through text. To do that, just text Akuo, AKOUO, and the dollar amount you want to give to the number 77977. Now, if you don't want to give electronically, we also have our P.O. Box available if you would like to send your gift through a check. For that, all you have to do is mail it to Akuo at P.O. Box 100, 125, San Antonio, Texas, 78201. All right, that's all that we have for you this week. Before we go, I just want to pray over you one last time. Jesus, I thank you for today. I thank you for the way that you are moving in our community. I thank you for the way that you are building this community up, Lord. I pray that as these folks leave here today, that they would remember what you've called them to, that they would remember the kind of community that they have been called to build, Lord. I pray that they would be able to be honest and open and transparent with people around them, and vulnerable. I pray that they'd be able to give familial love in a fantastic way. I pray that they'd be able to receive familial love in a fantastic way. And I pray that they would be able to share the good news with the people around them, Lord. And I pray that this would all be an act of worship, a reaction to the greatness that you've given to each and every one of them. Jesus, we thank you for everything. We love you. And we pray these things in your holy and precious name. Amen. All right, that's all that I have for you this week. Just know that I love you, and I'll be praying for you the rest of the week.